such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today's case is about a victim who actually made a video about his own murder. If you had one last thing to say, what would your last breath ask for? Who would you call for? What advice would you give? Who would you blame? If you don't know, it's my absolute passion to tell these stories. I mean no harm or disrespect when I do so. So if that's something you would like to support me in doing, all you have to do is make sure you are subscribed with the post notification bell on, giving this video a thumbs up, and leave me a nice comment down below. I want to wish you all a happy new year, and also to tell you that if you're not following my Instagram or my second channel, make sure you are doing so in the new year because there's more to come. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2017 in Georgia, and Sierra Harp was a 28-year-old mother who had a 3-year-old daughter named Angel. They lived in an apartment in Riverdale, which was near Atlanta, with Angel's father, Raheem Grant. Now, Angel was actually the same age as her father when he started his ultimate passion, which was music. Raheem had actually picked up drumming at the age of only 3, and then later picked up the microphone and then started rapping on his own. From a very young age, it was known that this was what he was supposed to do. And then his first passion in life became his full-time career. He could mix music and create it for others, as well as being a great rapper himself. He went under the alias Red Beezy, and he had worked really hard for this because when he was 3 he started, but then by the age of 7 he had a job in this career because he actually was on a show called Showtime at the Apollo, and he was rapping for education. So he was basically rapping for kids to learn something, and he really loved doing this, but eventually he started, wanting to actually rap and say his own things and not be for kids anymore. Later in life, he would open up for Ludacris and many more famous and talented performers. He was known to be a free spirit and a very smart businessman too. He had a manager who happened to be his mother as well, and he was at such a high point in his career. In fact, that year, 2017, he was actually going to go on a year-long national tour for the very first time.
We're really working with a lot of people, making a lot of connections, you know what I'm saying, that usually wouldn't be made. You know what it is, like real mob connections, dog.
What is it that you want to accomplish this year?
Get money. You already know it, man. I'm trying to get the richest I've never been in my life. You know what I'm saying? Right now, if you can see, man, your boy iced out, man. I probably got over 75 bands worth of jewelry on me right now, but that's a whole nother topic. But I'm just saying, man, I get money out here in the streets, but I'm trying to really get the most money I ever made in my life, nigga. I'm really trying to be up there with these Bill Gates, you know what I'm saying, on some boss shit, man. Yeah.
When Raheem was not performing though, he actually loved being home because his daughter was his #1 priority. Angel was everything to him, and Raheem and Sierra were not in an official relationship, but they did live together to co-parent because they figured that would be best for Angel. Now, Raheem also wasn't on the birth certificate and didn't technically have custody, so this was great for both of them because Raheem could see his daughter anyway. Both of them worked very hard to provide Angel the best life that they could. Sierra had her own job marketing local bars and clubs, and that's actually where the two met because she was there trying to get a job at the same time Raheem was performing at one of the clubs, and they kind of hit it off after that and soon enough had a child. This was both of theirs very first child, and Raheem was so excited because it made him even more passionate about his music because he finally had something to work towards, something other than himself to provide for his baby girl. While he was out of town performing, Sierra was able to stay home with Angel, and it appeared to be a very well-working partnership with one happy daughter. And although this assumption makes all of us true crime lovers kind of suspicious, it's not as you may think. You see, Raheem often spoke about the harshness of the rapping community, the music industry, and the violence that surrounded it, and how he was constantly trying to get away from it. You can roll the dice, but don't crap out, cause you gambling with so light. he knew that it wasn't just something that happened to him. It was something that happened to many rappers, in fact, most of them. And he tried to stay away from it for as much as he could, especially because of his daughter. But he also had to stay in the middle of it in order to make money, because that was his career.
Link. 2 cups, all I want. 2 cups, all I need. 2 cups, 2 cups, 2 cups. Link.
Now, his signature look was a part down the middle with braids on his hair. He had multiple tattoos everywhere. He was said to be so successful because he knew how to get a crowd pumped and excited. And as soon as he walked on stage, they just roared with enthusiasm. And so he was thought to be born for this kind of job. Yet there was still a certain sacrifice that had to be made, and there was so much hate and competition between the rappers and the talent that Raheem had actually told his mother at one point he feared he was not going to make it past his 20s, that he was going to be killed. It turned out that he was correct, even though he worked his butt off to be in the best place he could be, to stay away from all of this. And he had also chosen to live in one of the safest places in the area in Riverdale for his daughter. It was a gated community filled with very little crime. But on December 29th of 2017, the Riverdale police barged into Raheem Grant's residence. And that is when they found him on the floor. Now, he was face down between the bathroom and the bedroom with 3 bullet wounds in his body and head, or at least that's how many they counted at the time. They weren't sure if there could be more. There was a pool of blood collecting at his head and splatters on the wall. There was also a bullet hole that had ricocheted from a mirror. It appeared that Raheem had predicted his fate. However, what led up to it wasn't exactly what he originally feared. It turned out that almost no one knew the real Raheem, or the man he was at 28 years old. The police hadn't just showed up at Raheem's residence for his murder. In fact, they had a completely different goal in mind. They were going to arrest Raheem. Now, police originally got a 911 call that night at around 10:50 of a neighbor of Raheem's saying that she had quite a story to tell. When investigators first showed up, they went to the neighbor's home first of all, and that is where they found an injured woman. Now, she was bleeding from her legs from multiple stab wounds, and she was screaming and crying hysterically, making it very hard to talk to her. They couldn't figure out what had gone on, and the neighbor actually said that she knew who this woman was, which they were grateful for because she couldn't even say her own name. This woman said that this was Sierra Harp, and she had brought her 3-year-old daughter, Angel. She said that she knew exactly where she lived. She lived with a man who was her partner named Raheem just down the street. She believed that this was some sort of domestic incident, and she said that she didn't really know where Raheem was, if he was at the home, and that is why she had locked the door when Sierra came in, fearing that Raheem would come after her. So when investigators went to Raheem's home, they were not expecting a deceased suspect, but Sierra hadn't been able to tell them anything about what happened, and now Raheem couldn't either. While this crime scene was searched, Sierra was obviously brought to the police station. She was trying to gather herself as they talked to her, and she was also not under arrest. She knew that. It was obvious that this was self-defense. She had these stab wounds on her legs that were bleeding profusely, and they believed she had saved herself and her daughter's life that night. But no one had known that Raheem was an abusive man. This shocked the entire community where he lived, the entire rapping community, his mother, everyone. Their daughter Angel was then taken into CPS, or Child Protective Services, and then was given to Sierra's mother to watch over while this whole thing settled down. Inside his home, investigators found a knife. Now, this was bloody and it was just kind of lying on the floor. And then they went to the neighbor's home and found the gun. This was a pistol that was registered to someone in Raheem's family and was said to be carried by him. Sierra was distraught and terrified, and she still couldn't really say what had happened. She was also highly intoxicated as well. It was 3 times the legal limit, and she ended up having to be taken to the hospital to deal with her injuries. But she didn't want to be touched by the staff. She kept fighting them. She didn't want to be in that area surrounded by anybody. When Raheem's mother turned manager, who was named Geraldine, heard about this, her grief was delayed by her anger. She immediately went to the investigators, and she was saying that Raheem was not a violent man. She had never seen him hit a girl, and that when he was angry, he would just simply get quiet and walk away. He was not a physical man. They then listened to her talk about who she believed Sierra really was. She said Sierra was actually obsessed with Raheem from the very beginning and got herself pregnant to have his child, to basically get closer to his fame and success. She said Raheem took her into his home, helped her with everything, paid for everything, and that she owed him everything. Investigators listened. They ultimately thought that it wasn't Geraldine's fault that she hadn't seen the signs that her son was abusive. But Geraldine told them she was not going to stand for them accusing her son of abuse, and she just wanted the truth. She said that if he really was abusive, she would take Sierra's side. It wasn't about that. It wasn't about the fact that this was her son. It was about the fact that she knew that this was not what happened. When Sierra was healing, she was questioned again, and she confirmed what investigators had concluded, that Raheem had attacked her with these knives and she shot him in self-defense. Now, Sierra said she couldn't really remember how it all started, but she said that she was cooking dinner that night and he started drinking and taking Xanax, and she was begging him not to because she said that when he would drink and take meds, he would get really angry with her, so she didn't want to deal with that. She was begging him not to do it, and that's when he got violent. She said after that he began beating her, she fell to the floor, and then she actually carried a knife which was normally in her ankle in a holster, and it fell out, and that is when Raheem picked it up and began stabbing her. Sierra said that blood was running into her eyes at that point. She could not see anything, but she knew she had to do something to save her life, and so at that point she grabbed for Raheem's gun, which he often carried on him. She was able to reach for it, grab it, and began shooting wildly at whatever she could because she couldn't see him. Now, when she stopped, she said she looked over, she saw that her daughter was in the area, so she grabbed Angel and she ran to the neighbor's house. She said that is the last thing she remembered before she woke up at the hospital. She didn't remember investigators talking to her the first time, and that is when she was told that the autopsy revealed that Raheem had actually been shot 7 times in the upper back, lower back, twice in each arm, and once in the head. The only witness to this crime was a traumatized 3-year-old girl, but thankfully this seemed to be an easy enough shut and closed case that they would not need to further make her relive the situation. Now, the only suspicious element that some of the investigators were clinging on to was the fact that Raheem's autopsy also revealed that he had been stabbed and slashed in the back and in the face, kind of on his forehead. Now, Sierra had mentioned this knife, but she had never mentioned using it on him back, and so that is when they kind of asked Sierra, we just need to clear this thing up. Did you maybe use the knife on him and not remember? And Sierra said that she had never stabbed him, but he probably stabbed himself. There was also the fact that Raheem was shot in the top of the head, near kind of the back, as though he was face down or turned away. Some of the investigators began to believe there was something Sierra wasn't telling them, and that is when she finally admitted that baby Angel was not the only possible witness that night. She began saying that a woman named Elise Jones was over that night to be with Raheem. They were on the couch hanging out. Sierra was in the kitchen, and if you remember, Raheem and Sierra were not together. They were not a couple. So they were able to have these people over, these opposite sex, to hang out with. And so Elise was said to be with Raheem in the living room, and Sierra said she was still there when the beating of her started, and that she kept crying out saying that she needed help, but Elise left the apartment instead. Now, Elise was found and she was questioned, and she said she sent Raheem a text that night saying she was going to go ahead and head out, but not because there was some sort of beating happening. She said that Raheem and her were hanging out when they had both gone, Sierra and Raheem, into this back room, and she began hearing kind of some arguing, some bickering, but she just thought that she didn't want to get in the middle of it. It didn't seem dangerous. It seemed like a little, a little tiff, a little fight that was going to blow over quickly. She didn't believe anyone was in danger, especially not the 3-year-old baby girl who was there as well. So she said she just texted Raheem that she was going to go ahead and leave, and then she did. She said she never heard shots. She never heard anybody screaming for help. The more investigators learned, the less they were believing Sierra's side of the story, which was very hard because they didn't want a woman who was possibly abused to feel like she wasn't being heard. However, that is when Raheem's mother, Geraldine, then came forward with information she remembered. She said that she had given Raheem some advice at one point. She then told police that they needed to find his cell phone immediately and search his videos. You see, she had started to tell Raheem that when Sierra was kind of acting out, that if he was ever in trouble, he needed to record it, not only for his own safety, but for the safety of their daughter, to prove that Sierra could not watch her or could not be a good parent, a good role model for Angel. It took weeks of them searching because they had located the phone. They had gotten it from Raheem's home. But the problem was he had a passcode on it and nobody knew it except Sierra. So they had already released Sierra. They had told her that, they would just need to talk to her occasionally to close up the case, but she was free and they wanted her to believe that. And so they had called her and they had said, to end things, we just need to get into Raheem's cell phone, so we need his passcode. And that is when Sierra actually gave it to them. And finally, they could click play on what was inside and have their answers unfolding like a movie. The first video recorded that night did not ease them into the horror. You see, as the camera was turned on, it showed Raheem in the bathroom, his face covered with blood. He was talking about how Sierra had done this to him. He accused her by name, saying that he could not believe she was doing this, that he was in pain. He was obviously bleeding. And while he was doing this, you could hear Sierra screaming in the background. At this point, a gunshot rang out and Raheem fell to the floor. Then you could see Sierra come into the bathroom, stand over him, and begin yelling at him. At this point, investigators paused the videos because they noticed that Sierra was wearing shorts, and where the stab wounds in her legs had been, had nothing on them at that point in the video when she shot Raheem. They were not bloody. There was nothing wrong with them. The only blood on her was on her face. That is when Sierra noticed the camera, and it was shut on and off for several different times during these 13 minutes of pure horror. But when they were on, Sierra was saying that he had abused her for the last 4 years. He did her wrong. He was horrible to her. And Raheem is telling her not to do this because she would go to prison, and she's saying that she doesn't care. It will be worth it.
I do not care if I go to jail for the rest of my life.
And as Raheem bleeds onto the bathroom floor, you can faintly hear him saying that he's going to die. And then he asks for water. And then in a final ditch effort, he asks if he can hug his daughter. And that is when Sierra says, "You can crawl to her, mother effer." Except when he tries, he is shot 2 more times, once in the back of the head, killing him. The camera cuts out for the final time and we know what happened next. It was 13 minutes of footage, but what was even more horrifying was that their 3-year-old daughter watched it in real time. Investigators brought Sierra back in to watch the footage and see what she would say or how she would react. And when the first shot rang out, she kind of covered her face, but she continued to say it was self-defense. She was not cracking. She continued to say the same exact story. And investigators wondered if maybe she believed that her story was the correct one. But nearly 2 months after his murder, Raheem got his justice. And on February 22nd of 2018, Sierra was finally arrested, all because Raheem had recorded his own death. The Raheem who everyone was so quick to believe deserved it had been dealing with abuse from Sierra for long enough to believe that the only way for people to believe him was to actually record her doing this. It turned out he had also been trying to get full custody of Angel and get her away from Sierra, and Sierra had actually signed the pages a month prior. It's not known if she signed them, if these were forged. It's not known what really happened, but the pages were signed and appeared to be by Sierra. During the trial, Sierra was actually quite emotional, and she turned to Geraldine and she said I was not in my right state of mind. Had I not been drunk, it would have never happened. Miss Grant Bryson, I am truly, truly sorry. Geraldine said she felt like she was in a dream she couldn't wake up from, and she wanted Sierra to realize that she couldn't just go around killing people. Sierra's attorney asked for only a 5-year sentence, and Sierra's uncle testified that Sierra had a very toxic childhood with lots of abuse, and that she had to walk on eggshells for a lot of her childhood.
The relationship within the home was quite toxic.
But Sierra's mother got on the stand to say that Sierra had always been a manipulative liar, that she needed to be sterilized to have no children ever again, and that she needed the harshest punishment. That wherever she went, chaos followed and trouble was sure to ensue.
You reveled in disrespect, foolery, and ignorance. Envious nature took control, and you murdered Raheem for moving on without you. You repeatedly hurt the family, our family, and all the people who ever tried to help you. We, the family, asked the court to sterilize Sierra Harp to prevent any more children being born. We also asked for the highest punishment of life without parole.
She explained that Sierra never forgave Raheem for not wanting a full relationship with her, and that her envious nature took control of her, and she murdered Raheem for moving on without her. Now, everyone began bashing Sierra's mother for being so harsh, for being so honest about how she felt about her daughter, but Geraldine, Raheem's mother, was grateful because she said that most parents of children who commit crimes refuse to turn them in or stand up for what's right. But Sierra's mother did just that and beyond, because she told the truth about who she really was. She didn't sugarcoat it. She had been holding that in, it sounded like, for a very long time.
Grant's mother wanted the death penalty, but it wasn't on the table.
You showed no mercy for my son, Sierra, and I asked the court to show no mercy for you.
With no regards whatsoever, you murdered and you snatched Angel's dad away from her.
One relative after the other.
I hope God don't have mercy on your soul, as you didn't have mercy on his.
Took the stand during the sentencing hearing for convicted murderer Sierra Harp.
So we're asking that the court impose the maximum punishment.
And in fact, one of Sierra's own attorneys walked out of this case after they had tried to basically claim this was battered women's syndrome, and it went haywire. Sierra begged for leniency, saying that she was truly remorseful, but she was then sentenced to 125 years in prison at the Pulaski State Prison in Hawkinsville, Georgia. And Geraldine and Sierra's mother began to get really close after that, and they even hugged after the sentence was brought down. It turned out that in the beginning of Sierra and Raheem's relationship, if you can even call it that, it may have been just as horrific as the end, because some sources say that they simply met at this club, that Sierra asked Raheem for a marketing job because that's what she did, and then they started working together, and then it went into a sexual relationship, and then they had a child. However, others claim that it was much more sinister, and that when they were hanging out at one point, Sierra actually drugged Raheem and then forced herself upon him. And that's how she got the child, because she wanted his child in particular to be able to take his money. It was found that in Sierra's childhood, she was known to get in fights and to get in trouble a lot at school. She even carried that same pocket knife with her that she eventually used on Raheem and then herself to make it look like Raheem used it on her. She had one of those during her teenage years, and she ended up being kicked out of school for stabbing someone over a boy. So it turned out her rage had a pattern. She would skip school, she never followed the rules, she didn't listen to her mother, and she also had multiple allegations that she placed against a teacher and a neighbor for sexually assaulting her, but it was said that no evidence was ever found that that was true, and many believed that she was just someone who was very good at lying, that she would make up these little white lies that would spiral out of control, and soon enough, if you looked closely, you could tell she was lying. By the time of Raheem's murder, she hadn't even been living with him for too long. She had come to him with their child, saying that she was just kicked out of her previous residence and she needed somewhere to stay, and Raheem knew that she would probably go far away if he didn't let her in, and he wanted to see his daughter no matter what, so he let her move in, and that's when the abuse started manipulated, but not by Raheem, as everyone thought, by Sierra. She would get into jealous rages if Raheem mentioned another woman, brought someone by their house, or didn't show Sierra enough love. Now, domestic violence against men is something that many don't want to believe is possible. And although domestic violence against women is far more common, there are instances when a woman can be an abuser, and just because it's uncommon, many men don't see the signs. And they don't see it until it's too late, or they're reluctant to speak out because they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't believe it happens to other men, and so they don't want it to seem that they are, not superior men, that they are not manly enough because they had to speak out and get help. And due to these gender norms, men can often believe that they are completely alone. And, it's a toss-up because, thankfully, they're not alone. They don't have to feel alone. But unfortunately, this happens often enough that they're not alone, Now, because men often grow up hearing that expressing themselves and showing their emotions isn't okay, it makes it even harder to ask for help or to show that they are being abused later on in life, which is why it matters so much to not spew these gender norms when they are children, when they are teenagers, because men deserve to feel like they need help, and it won't make them any less of a man. It won't make them weak. And this does happen, and just the same as how women deserve that justice, so do men who are abused as well. Now, just like some women in these situations, men too stay in these relationships if there are children involved because they want to make sure their abuser won't harm the children or take them away forever, just like in Raheem's case. I wanted to share this with you because I thought that Geraldine's advice about telling her son to record this abuse actually ended up solving the case. We have so much power in our hands today with these devices, power that the criminal justice system often takes away from us. And so we can kind of take it back with this sort of evidence that we are able to carry and collect. It takes the power back that manipulators and abusers often take away from us, and then our voice gets heard. So to get this record of what actually occurred, so you're not being gaslighted by an abuser, is the most incredible thing you can do for yourself, because you can see how a manipulator's worst fear is to be called out and to be acknowledged as an abuser, and to have people see them in that light when they're so good at pretending they're nothing like that. Because you could see even in this case that Sierra, on video, when she realized it was recording, she shut it off, she turned it back on, and she began to spin this whole story about Raheem, that he was the problem and that she was this victim. But he had already gotten this clip that showed that that wasn't the case at all. Or do you believe it was? Do you believe this was a case of both sides being abusive? Because I know some people have speculated that. I don't like to say that about victims, but it can be a case of a very toxic relationship where both sides are abusive. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that as well. Now, this case had to be handled very carefully because no one wanted to accidentally accuse a woman of murder if she was actually the victim. But the evidence ended up showing that, for the most part, this was a woman who was staging herself as the victim to escape charges. And if that is true, if Raheem really was not an abuser, if you don't believe that he had anything to do with that and he was simply just a victim, that is an absolutely disgusting act by Sierra, because there are millions of women all over the world who are fighting to be heard and believed, and she used their story to have empathy for her crime. And the fact that Raheem was asking for his daughter in those final moments, all he wanted was a hug, and she couldn't even allow him that. That kind of rage, is that because she was truly a victim too? Because she'd finally gotten her justice? She was that angry? Because you don't want to think, can someone be that angry, that full of rage? But we have seen in these cases that people can. That sometimes it doesn't come from just a vengeful thing. Sometimes it just comes from them being evil. So I know that it's kind of a hard one to touch on and to figure out what you believe. And I don't know, I just really don't think that Raheem did anything. I think that he was trying to do his best for his child, and that he probably didn't even want to be around Sierra. If he was working so hard to stay out of the bad part of the rapping community, he wouldn't have wanted to stay in this toxic relationship, especially because he wasn't really in a relationship with her, you know? He had told her from the very beginning this was a partnership, and because they had a baby, they were going to co-parent, but it wasn't going to be them together. And I think that infuriated Sierra more than anything. But I really hope you guys are having a wonderful start to the new year. I hope you had the best holidays. I am so happy to be back, and I am so grateful for every single one of you. So don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.